Hi, and welcome to the Lizzie Borden podcast. I'm your host, Kimber Eberly, and my co-host, Shelly Dietzick. I always get your name like it's crazy name, but I always have problems pronouncing it. But we're glad to be here. We're very excited to be here on a lovely Sunday night. Um, just a little bit about us. Both of us have published books. I recently published a book called Inadmissible, The Case of Lizzie Borden and Other Murderous Women. And Shelley has two books out about the Lizzie Borden case. Shelley, you want to tell them which books you have out?
Yes, so we're having a little technical difficulty. There we go. Okay. Um, you want me to tell about
Yeah,
the
your
books I have?
books. Your books.
Well, one of them actually came out the first edition in 2011, and it came about as a result of working at the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast and taking so many people on tours of Oak Grove Cemetery. And they wanted to see where Judge Blaisdell was buried and different people in the case. And so this book has maps and mini bios of everyone who is buried there and also who's not buried there, so you don't waste time looking for them. And that's in its printing now. It's available on Amazon and at the house and the Fall River Historical Society, and also through Hollis Press. The second book my daughter and I brought out in 2018, and that, I've always been interested in textiles and late Victorian fashion, particularly what Lizzie wore throughout her ordeal, from the inquest right through the acquittal and after. A lot of this material was gleaned from papers who covered the trial every day and gave descriptions of the women who were following the trial were very, very interested in what Lizzie wore to court. And it's also sort of educational. There's a little bit about Victorian fashion in the book and paper dolls of Lizzie you can cut up and dress. And that is available at the Historical Society, the Bed and Breakfast, and also through Hollister Press. And there'll be a new book coming out this summer before Lizzie's birthday. And it will be every place you can imagine you can visit that has any connection at all with Lizzie Borden.
Yeah,
So that,
I'm really looking forward to that one.
well, it's
So
been 30 years in the making. So
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I just so you've been studying the case for some 30 years. I know at one point you were a tour guide at the house, right? Or you worked at the house.
yes, I was there for almost 18 years.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
So I
I
think
had
that's fan. So we got the
I'd
right
worked.
person on this podcast because I know that I mean I consider you a historian. You've done so much research. My book I know I spent about 2 years heavily researching other people's research. So none of mine is like first hand. Like I didn't discover any of my stuff like some of like you have, or people that went out in the field, because of course I don't live in Fall River, but I've formed many opinions, an opinion like many other people have formed opinions. And for new people that are just joining and don't know a lot about the case, this is a podcast about an unsolved murder, which Lizzie Borden was accused and acquitted of, and it was killing her stepmother and her father with a hatchet. And that's basically the gist of the story. It's an unsolved case, so many people love that murder mystery. It happened in the 1800s, and so we're gonna kind of stay true to the 1800s when we discuss the case. Yeah, Shelly knows anything and everything. You're absolutely right. She does. She's my go to person. Um, but
There
I'm
must
really
be some of
excited
my
about.
friends writing in.
I'm really excited about your book. Like a few places that I have myself personally visited is the Swansea Farm and the cemetery, and of course Maplecroft, which I recently visited. Just
Very lucky to see inside of Maplecroft. Yeah.
yes, yes. It's an amazing place. And I have my feelings about it, but let's start out with talking about just Fall River in general, because when you and I were discussing what we were going to do in the podcast, we both agreed that in order to understand the story, you really have to understand a little bit of the history with Fall River and what was happening around that time period in the late 1800s. And about the Bordens too, because everyone thinks, Mr. Borden, he was a rich man in Fall River. Derek, they still are doing tours of the house. Yes, they are.
Yes,
Um,
that can,
yeah,
as well as overnight stays are continuing
yeah,
while the house is in the process of undergoing a change in management.
yeah.
Mhm.
So somebody wants to meet you personally, Shelley. Judy.
Wants to meet me.
Yeah,
Oh, Judy.
yeah,
Hi,
yeah.
Judy lives in Fall River, and we've been
Oh,
chatting online for many years. She lives near Maplecroft, I think.
okay, good. Yeah.
Got to pull this off one day.
Okay, good. So, Mr. Borden was a self-made millionaire. We were talking about there's two sides to the Borden. There's the very rich Borden, and then there's the not so rich Borden, right?
Yes, yes, we call them the have and the have not Bordens.
Okay.
And Andrew Borden was, I should say, a self-made man. He was certainly not the richest man in Fall River, but he was very
Hey,
hardworking,
Sue.
and he neither borrowed money nor did he lend any either. He was very frugal and was a Yankee type, waste not, want not, and he often gets portrayed as a villain and oh, the skinflint and horrible, nasty man. A lot of us who come into the Borden case, the newbies, go back to Elizabeth Montgomery's 1975
Right.
movie, and they get a very bad first impression of Andrew and an even worse one of poor Abby Borden, who gets painted with
Yeah, and the thing
ugly brush.
right, and the thing with Andrew, he wasn't an undertaker. He worked for a funeral home, and they
No,
supplied chairs and
yeah, he
furniture.
didn't. He didn't actually work for a funeral home. Funeral homes don't come in history till later, when there's
Okay.
transportation. He trained as a carpenter in his youth. And in those days, men to make ends meet usually had two or three things they did. He at farming. He was trained as a carpenter and later went into business with William Almy. Had a furniture store
Right.
right on South Main Street. And the thing about furniture stores in the day, they too turned a hand to other things that would have to do with furnishings. And if you look in the Fall River directory for those years, you'll see, I think listed as cabinet maker, home furnishing, and undertaking. Undertaking simply meant you provided chairs and the bier to lay the casket on and any accoutrement you would need for a funeral. He was
Right. So
not
people
involved.
right, people get that confused. So he wasn't an
Yes,
undertaker. He did
no, no.
undertakings with all the
He
furniture and
had
supplies needed.
to provide for.
Right.
And
Did
they
he
get
have a
that wrong in the
right, they
movie. And you
right.
show him embalming people in the basement at Second Street,
Yeah,
and
I
that
was
would
scared
not
slack.
ever happen.
Well, I have
I'm
to
going
say about that movie though, everything is pretty spot on though, except a few things in that movie. I mean, it portrayed them pretty well.
It's the
Um,
best thing I've ever seen on
yeah,
screen.
Yeah,
about the Borden case. And Elizabeth Montgomery was amazing
she is
and
amazing.
very
Isn't
nuanced, very
isn't
complex.
isn't she like related or something somewhat to Lizzie? There's a
Recently, yeah, you'll see Lizzie appearing in her family tree if you're part of it. Right.
right. There's a trivia question. Speaking of trivia
Mhm.
questions, throughout this podcast, we're going to ask you 5 questions, and you guys will have an opportunity to answer it. The first one's going to be right now. We want to test your skills on how much you know about the Lizzie Borden case. So, um, Abby Borden, we want to know. Abby Borden was married to Andrew Borden, of course, but how old was Abby Durfee Gray when she married Andrew Borden? Was she, and this is going to be like a multiple choice, was she A, 35 years old? Was she B, 37 years old? Or was she C, 29 years old? And if you want to take a guess, you can put it in the chat if you know the answer. And at the end, we're going to answer all of the trivia questions and we're going to do a drawing for a gift that we'll give you. All right, so as we move on, so that was how old was Abby Durfee Gray when she married Andrew Borden? Was she 35? B, was she 37? Or C, was she 29? Okay, so getting back to did did Mr. Borden have a Hertz, like a horse drawn carriage with a Hertz, like or like
No, no,
a funeral
no,
kind of?
no. No, he was not a funeral director. He was not an embalmer.
No, but did he
He,
have a horse drawn carriage for bodies to transport them? I think I read that somewhere where.
I've never seen that
Okay.
anywhere. I've heard that as a carpenter, he did have occasion to build coffins, which makes sense. If you're a
Yeah.
carpenter, you have a furniture store and you
Okay.
provided for funerals. And he would probably have a buckboard and team to transport chairs and other large items you need to put on a funeral. But the hearse with the horses with the black plumes, no.
So okay, good. So we have some answers going on, which
Oh,
is
from the
yeah,
question,
which
yeah.
is good. All
Well,
right.
this is
So
a
even if you
very
get the
intelligent press.
question right or wrong, we're still going to put you in the drawing. So there's no right or wrong answer. You're still going to go in the drawing. We got to figure out a better way to do this though. But for now, this is how we're doing it. So I recently the discussion came up with you and me. We were talking about the girls and when they were born and their mother Sarah, whom died at a very young age too, right? She died of
Yes.
some uterine something wrong, like
Well, Abby Borden died of, yes, Sarah Borden died of uterine congestion. It might have
right.
been cervical cancer, something like that, that they call by a different name. Yeah.
Yeah, at a very young age too. Um
Yes.
But I was recently looking at the photos, and we'll bring them up. And you and I were recently having this discussion about who looks like who. So I'm bringing one photo up of the 3 girls, or the 2 girls and the mother, Sarah. And I want to do a comparison. First of all, this photo, if you look at it, I don't think they look alike at all. I mean, you guys can write in the chat if you think they look alike. I think they look quite different. Um, my opinion is Lizzie and Emma's eyes look very different. Their noses are different. Their mouths look pretty good. Pretty the same. Lizzie's jawline's a little heavier than Emma's. I don't know, Shelley, what do you
Yeah.
think?
Yes. Well, I always thought Lizzie had inherited Sarah Borden's moon wide face, very heavy lower jowl, is
Yeah.
how Lizzie was described in the newspaper. And that looks very much like her mother. Emma sort of has that long, narrow face of Andrew Borden. sort of thin and angular,
Yeah, so
where
it look
Lizzie is more rounded.
it looks like we're all in agreement that they don't look alike. Someone's saying that Emma looks like her dad. So give us the next picture, which is the three of them side by side. So I honestly think Emma looks more like Sarah than Lizzie. I think maybe Lizzie might have Andrew's features, which we'll move on to that. But this picture, I don't know. What's everybody think? I don't think Lizzie looks like her mom at all. Again, maybe the mouth.
Well, look at the lower half of Lizzie's face. From the nose down, it's very wide and heavier than the top part of her face. I
Right.
see more of Sarah in Lizzie than I do Andrew. And for Emma, more of father.
So you think Emma looks more like Andrew?
Who looks more like
See,
Andrew.
so Tracy says that Emma she thinks looks like Sarah here too. I kind of do too.
Oh, okay. I see the comments on the side of the screen
Yeah,
here.
yeah, Shelly,
I'm
pay
not,
attention.
yeah, I'm not seeing the pictures though. I'm not getting the pictures, so I don't know what you're putting up, but
Oh, you
uh,
can't see the photos?
can't see the photos. But we do agree on one thing,
Huh.
that the Morses have very unsettling eyes. Uncle John has them. The older picture of Lizzie's mother holding little Emma has those sort of peculiar eyes, and Lizzie has very unsettling eyes as
I
well.
think Lizzie's eyes also look like John Morris, Sarah's brother. I think Lizzie has those crazy eyes like him too. I
Well, all the Morses they said were peculiar, and they do have rather peculiar looking eyes and unsettling.
and that's kind of what I'm getting at. You know, the lineage of if Lizzie was the murderer, what side of the family would that roll on? Because a lot of people said that Sarah was very peculiar too, and had
Indeed,
her.
yes. Well, I would say Morse, it's the Morse connection, where we hear eccentric, peculiar. Lord knows Uncle John was an odd duck, for sure.
Yeah,
Uh, uh, Lizzie's mother also was said to have a temper. Oh, I see the photos now. Okay.
oh, good, good. You finally got him. Wow,
Yeah,
you're really
that's
behind.
a young Sarah. Yeah, that's a young Sarah. I
Yeah.
think this is a portrait that was found in
I think she
Luther's
would.
store.
Yeah, I think she was in her 30s. That's why I put this picture in because it's kind of the same age that the girls would be at with these pictures.
Well, now Lizzie would be probably, this is about 1890 maybe, would probably be about 30.
Okay.
Sarah, I think, yeah, might have been a little younger. And Emma, I'm not sure when that picture of Emma was taken,
Yeah, yeah.
but
So let's go to the next picture. I hope this comes up for you, Shelly. This is Andrew. Do you see that, Shelly?
not yet.
Not yet. Okay. It should roll up soon. So these are three photos of Andrew. One when he was 30, another one when maybe he was in his 40s, and then the last one, of course, is when he died. And looking at these, I don't know which daughter. I mean, I'm trying to think if Lizzie looks like Andrew. Any thoughts on that? I think the second picture, like I hope it comes up soon, Shelly. We'll have to work on that. That's note for technical. Work on
Right,
Shelley's photos.
you got a delay.
The
I,
middle
I'm,
pic. Yeah,
I'm
the mid.
covering my shirt because I think it makes the screen go crazy. It's a black and white stripe, so
Oh,
is
okay, I
that
got you.
better? That's better.
The
Okay.
middle picture, I think Lizzie looks like her father with the eyes. I think the eyes, but the lips are very thin. Definitely, they have their mother's look with the lower part of the face because the lips look very thin. The eyes are kind of yeah. I don't know. Andrew was kind of a little kooky too. Do you think?
Well, photography, you had to stay very still. which is why I love the new animations. And I've animated everybody in the story. I put a lot of them up on my own website
Yeah.
and Facebook.
So maybe we can
And it
bring.
adds a lot more. Yeah, it adds more. You're seeing one frozen moment of somebody's face.
Yeah.
And they had to remain rigid. When you start moving their features around, Abby looks softer and more approachable.
Nobody
Lizzie almost,
smiled back then, right? For photos?
well,
Nobody
you're
smiled.
supposed to look dignified, I think, and they weren't. There were comic ones. I've seen some from that time period that are purposely funny,
Yeah,
but as a
so
rule, no.
I think we have that your website with the animations. Maybe we can bring them up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and if anyone has any
Yeah.
questions, oh, there they are. Uh, I hopefully you'll get this. You did such a great job with this. So I think they're kind of creepy looking, but I like that they're the colorization.
It adds a lot of dimension.
Yeah.
And if you scroll up a little bit, you can see Uncle John. I was very excited about two people. One was Bridget Sullivan. For years, we've had that one image of Bridget that looks
Yeah.
a little Christopher Reeve, and her eyes are so dark they don't have any life in them. And after a lot
They
of
are kind of
work,
creepy.
yeah, after a lot of work and cleaning up that photo, when we put it into My Heritage artificial intelligence software, um, Bridget has come to life, and it was a revelation.
Yeah, Andrew kind of looks grandfatherish here. I mean, he doesn't look like a he looks like a grandfather kind of image. Um John Morse always looked very like beady
Creepy.
eyed to me.
Creepy is the word I'm most
Yeah.
told about when they see his face. He looks like he's up to no good. Poor Uncle John. He can't help his face. I'm sure he
Oh,
regretted
so
spending the night forever.
yeah,
Like
so Derek saying the bottom
murder.
left looks like Abraham Lincoln. It's the beard, but this is a picture of John Morse, Derek, who is Lizzie's mother's brother. And he played a key role in the trial too.
And they tend to leave him out of some of
Yeah.
the made for the movies, made for the screen. And Uncle John's really key for a lot of reasons. And he is the first suspect. And then, the night of
Yes.
the murder, people were following him on the street when he went to the post office. The public was anxious for someone to be arrested quickly for a crime such as this. And they were anxiously casting about for anybody who might have been there or might have had a motive. So Uncle John was latched upon really early in the story.
Yeah, there was always the comment when he came back to the house, and he hung out in the backyard eating a pear before he even walked into the house. Uh, did he know about the murders then, or what was going on, or was it kind of like people question why he might have done that, like hung
It,
out
it,
in the
it was,
backyard before he went in?
I know, I mean, he would have seen people starting to gather around in the yard. But once again, people were a little more formal and wouldn't have burst into the house without knocking or someone coming to the door. And
Yeah, there was a question: wasn't Uncle John theorized to be involved with the case? And thank you for that question. And yes, many theories came out with where Uncle John like was a suspect, either in a conspiracy or I honestly, in my opinion, don't think that he had anything to do with the murders. I solely believe that it was a woman thing. Yeah.
we agree on that, Kimber. I've read your very excellent book,
Thank you,
uh,
Shelly.
and it was
That
a
means a lot coming
joy
from
to
you.
read.
Thank you.
Yes, you put the work in. I can see you did the research. I love the way you've compared Lizzie's case to other female. uh, lady killers, if you want to call
Yes.
them
Yeah, you can
that.
do
And
that. Lady
that's
killers.
useful. But I also and liked very much was you delved into women's issues of the time,
Mm-hmm.
which is very important. You go to study the Borden case, it's essential. You know a little bit about the history of Fall River, the city, the maritime and textile background, the structure of the city with the mill owners and the wealthy up on the northern end of town in the hill section, uh, the stratification of society. It was like a pyramid, and you begin with the workers and the middle class, all those who supported those at the top of the pyramid, which were few in number. These are the Braytons and the Duvals and
So, Derek,
um,
it is National Poetry Month. So, thank you for the famous Lizzie Borden poem. Lizzie Borden took an axe. Um, that's great.
oh, a lot of
Yeah,
comment here.
yeah,
I'm finally seeing them
yeah,
coming through.
yeah.
Someone,
So,
Steve wants to know, wasn't Uncle John also theorized to be involved in Abby's death? And that's a very interesting question. It's just possible, I've done some experiments and timings, where Uncle John might have been able to return to the house after Andrew had left, and Abby would not have been alarmed. He could have said he left something in the guest room or something.
wait a minute. Did
Uh,
you go to where the house would have been, where he was visiting, and like
yes,
walked
I
it?
did. I did. I've done a video on
Wow.
Warps and Wefts YouTube.
Yeah.
And the way Bassett Street, when he went to visit, if he didn't walk, if he had taken one of the horse cars, it's just possible he might have been able to, since we don't know the exact moment when Abby Gordon is killed, it might have worked. I don't put much faith in it, but yes, that is true, Steve. There was some thought at one time that maybe he could have not been telling the truth about his timeline and had come back into the house and murdered Abby
So
upstairs.
Rusty's saying his alibis were too perfect unless he had OCD, could remember all those details, but not notice something going on when he returned. And that's the thing, he did. He
Thought.
remembered everything, but it was like he had nothing going on when he got back to the house. Like,
I've been that way myself, and I've seen other people, I mean, who are preoccupied, and it was the lunch hour. He's a bunch of people in the street, and maybe in his mind he's thinking about, oh, something business he had done at Swansea Farm the night before, and he knows he's hungry, and there's loads of fruit on the ground, as we know,
yeah,
and starts to observe, and he does talk to Mr. Sawyer, who had been posted on the side door landing,
yeah.
and learned bit by bit what was going on. But not when he immediately walked in the gate. And I can say I've been absent-minded sometimes where a car nearly hits you or something because
And
you're not paying much attention.
and here's a thought, maybe because he did know Lizzie and what she was capable of. I think the whole family knew Lizzie and what she was capable of. So when John got to the house and thought, "Uh-oh, something's up," he probably sort of like knew and maybe had a moment of freak out knowing that he was going to walk into something bad, knowing Lizzie. He paused for a minute before he went in to brace himself.
Exactly. That's a good point. He also may have paused. I am myself an observant person, and I like to take in the surrounding and what am I looking, what's going on here? Meditative, in the pair and trying to
Yeah.
piece together do I just burst in on what's happening? Clearly something's going on. I'll ask this guy on the step. I don't know if he even knew Mr. Sawyer, but he approached the side stair. I think Uncle John has always gotten a bad rap because of those crazy Morse eyes of his.
Mhm.
He just looks like he's up to no good.
Yeah,
And it
and the
was,
fact that he lived with the butcher for a
yes,
while,
so
they
that didn't
thought,
help. 'Cause,
yeah, he was capable of butchering. 'Cause, yeah, he was capable of butchering. Yeah, and the fact that he lived with the butcher for a while, they thought, yeah, he was capable of. Yeah, he was capable of.
Well,
It is
yes,
difficult
and
to
he,
try to assign the reaction demeanor from then to how we are now. We are so immediate and vocal about everything. That's a good point.
well, that's it. And you tend to jump to conclusions. Oh, he trained as a butcher. He was staying in Dartmouth with Isaac Davis and his
Yeah.
son,
Mm-hmm.
and they were butchers. And oh my gosh, he probably had access to cleavers
Right,
and
right,
knives and all sorts of things. But that was not the murder weapon.
right.
Oh, and then he arrived with no luggage. That's a point people make. He shows up without even a toothbrush. Well, the guy didn't know he was going to be invited to spend the night, nor could he have predicted that he would be so late coming back from Swansea. He was invited to dinner over there. He stayed to
Right.
dinner, which made him late getting back to Fall River, turning the horse and carriage into the livery stable, and Abby and Andrew, of course, it's kind of late now to go all the way back to Dartmouth, to sleep over. And he was agreeable because he had heard while he was in Swansea, some of his relatives were in town. They were staying, I think, with the Everett on Weybosset Street. And it was convenient for him. So, of course, he didn't bring any clothing or
Right.
underwear,
Right. Why
toothbrush.
would he? Right. That's a
And
good point. So
of
we're going
course,
to ask the second question, and it has to do with the Borden Lizzie Borden's will. Okay. So the second question is, which is not true? A. Lizzie left in her will to Miss Helen Leeton one half of share of her A.J. Borden of the A.J. Borden building. B. Lizzie left in her will to Mrs. Grace Howe one half of the share of the A.J. Borden building. C. Lizzie left in her will to her sister Emma $5,000. Or D. Lizzie left in her will to an old schoolmate, Adelaide Whip, $1,000. So I'll try to repeat it real quickly again. Okay, so which is not true? Lizzie left in her will to Mrs. Helen Litton one half of the share of the A.J. Borden building. B. Lizzie left in her will to Mrs. Grace Howe the other half of the A.J. Borden building. C. Lizzie left to her sister Emma $5,000. Or D. Lizzie left in her will to an old schoolmate, Adeline Whip, $1,000. So who didn't get the goods?
some more questions coming in.
Okay.
Hi, Rusty. He says no Emma in the will. Okay.
All right, so we're gonna move on. So we you were talking about John Morse, and I forget what the last thing you said. It sparked another. Oh, about the hatchet, the murder weapon. And we were recently talking about that, talking about John having access to all these cleavers and stuff. But you said it wasn't the murder weapon. So what
Yeah.
was the murder weapon, Shelley? I know they have in Fall River Historical Society, I've been there, they have the hatchet that was at the trial. Oh, look at you. Nice.
We're
And it
always
isn't
prepared.
an axe, it's a hatchet. There's a difference between the two.
The
A,
handle length, yes, and the shape of the head.
yes.
Mm. This is an excellent weapon for a woman. It's not heavy if you have it well sharpened. The swing radius is fairly short.
Hmm.
With an axe, you have a long handle. It would have embedded itself in the woodwork on the backswing.
Right.
Um,
So here's one thing, like if you held a hatchet like that in your hand and it's a woman, she could pretty easily like hit somebody. Well, the thought of hitting somebody 19 times, first, I can just not get over because I did that experiment and that's a lot. I mean, it really is a lot to
it's
stand there and
overkill. Is overkill.
yeah,
But
it's
notice, Abby receives about twice as many blows as Andrew.
yeah, because Andrew had 11, Abby had 19.
Correct.
So, so let's go with the first murder. 19 hits to the head, standing there over and over and over. That's a lot of rage. That, if I can't even put myself in that perspective, but to me, that would be a lot of rage and a lot of energy. And like maybe after you're done, wouldn't you be a little exhausted with that?
I think the
It's
adrenaline would be
Tracy.
pumping for sure, and I would think it would take you a bit to come down from something like that.
Right,
Uh,
and there was about an hour between the murders. So Lizzie, if she did it, had plenty of time to unwind and to sort of
mm,
sit back and contemplate maybe what she had done. Because just to sit there and let's say the intended murder was to get rid of Abby. So we're sort of getting ahead of ourselves, because you want to look at the motive of why Lizzie would have wanted to do something like that.
uh, well, motive is the driving thing. As Agatha Christie said, you must have motive, weapon, and opportunity. Motive is paramount. Weapons can be found or
Yes.
substituted if you can't get the weapon you wanted. Opportunity is also very, very important.
Yes. Yeah,
And
you
if
said
you,
something very interesting to me the other day about the opportunity and about the locks on the house
yeah,
and with Bridget being outside conveniently doing the windows, not like Abby asked her to do the windows. That was really convenient. So you you were saying something that maybe Lizzie knew that she was going to be out there beforehand, or
well, I think we need to assume that there's probably some facts that we do not know and never will know. I've had a theory from years of thinking about it. A hot day, Bridget had thrown up in the backyard around 9 o'clock and was not feeling real great. Another reason why she didn't want to go down to Sargent's to the dress sale. She
right,
wanted to go lie down.
which was suggested to her
It
to
was
go.
Lizzie suggested about the sale. But I've often thought maybe ask Bridget to go outside and wash the windows because she and Lizzie had had some sort of falling out or an argument. There was some tension, and Abby didn't want Bridget to overhear the two women. This is something we'll never know.
Right.
Um, but I just thought it was odd that she made Bridget go out and do that when she was sick. But it certainly would have ensured her a private conversation with Lizzie.
Hey,
You have
Steve,
to
I, I,
everything.
I believe the second part of that comment that Lizzie killed Andrew out of necessity because Andrew came home unexpectedly.
Oh,
I agree. I
well,
totally agree with
yes.
that.
I've always called Andrew the collateral damage. I do believe that Abby Borden was the intended victim all along.
Right. I agree with that.
And
100%.
unfortunately, because Andrew was still very unwell from the sickness they had been enduring since Tuesday night,
Right.
he comes waltzing in, I guess, around quarter of 11 or so. Lizzie did not, I think, have enough time to get cleaned up, calm herself down, and get out of the house to establish an alibi. The alibi, I've always thought, might have been the dress sale at Sargent's, that she had planned to be out of the house at that dress sale, but then her father came home and she knew that her father would put two and two together, that she had been in the house all morning and hated his wife. She
So
was a
that comes
smart.
down to the dress, though, because your theory, right, that Lizzie planned to go out of the house, which, okay, but
Right.
when women go out of the house, they dress to go out of the house. Lizzie
Yeah.
was wearing a house dress, not like a dressy dress that she would wear to go out of the house, right? She was
At that point, she had not, yes, she had not changed her morning dress, no.
right, and Abby didn't either.
That's
And that's
correct.
another thing. Like Abby was found in her house cleaning clothes too, and there was that note, that mysterious note. Oh, Abby got a note and she was going out. But if she was going out, then why wasn't she dressed in outerwear, outing wear?
Well, exactly. The textiles in this case alone, we could do 3 podcasts on, the
Right.
forensic textile evidence, who was wearing, what happened to it. Yes, Abby, if she were going out to visit a sick friend, would not have been wearing the little cleaning cloth she had tied her hair in, up her hair, and the calico dress. She would have put on something nice, gloves and hat. She didn't go out of the house without that. Even Mrs. Churchill paused to put her going out of the house self together before she went over
Yes.
to
Yes, she
know.
did.
That's
Yes.
how important it is. Appearances, then, which is I always reiterate, you need to understand Victorian custom, not only of the era, but peculiar to Fall River. What was proper, what was done, what would have been offensive if not done. For instance, at the funeral, Lizzie was not wearing heavy mourning, and she was widely criticized for that. And
But
actually,
didn't
George,
she wear a hat the first day or something, like a feathery hat, sort of out of spite? Like it was a
no,
colored.
you're jumping way ahead now. That's to the trial. Yeah,
Oh, oh,
that's
okay. I'm
not the
sorry. Oh,
funeral.
okay. All right.
She wore a black lace dress to the funeral with a somber bonnet, is how it was described. But
But
she
they wore
didn't,
no veil, like veil or
well,
something,
she
right?
didn't have the veil and what they called mourning crepe, which was a lusterless black cloth for heavy mourning. And then when she was inquest on her way to Taunton, the arraignment, she was in blue,
Mm-hmm.
as you can see in the paper doll books, and she actually should have been in mourning. And it wasn't until George Robinson decided he would take her case, he encouraged her to wear mourning, to wear black. And she actually bought, to my count, 3 new black dresses. One was a mohair, a couple of damask ones. But getting to the bonnet, this is now we're at the trial in June of '93. I noticed one of the bonnets had cherry red ribbons on it,
Mm-hmm.
which was not mourning. And so that's
Right.
defiant. She was going to wear a little bit of color, even though
So,
Robinson told her not.
right. And so the morning of the murders, there was the light blue Bedford cord, which
Yes.
is the talk of the town, of course. The dress that she burnt one Sunday or
Yeah.
Saturday.
While,
Saturday.
while we're on this dress, let me just say something. I see a comment. It's not corduroy. Corduroy is a type of corded fabric where you have a raised warp. The warp goes up and down the loom, the weft goes right to left. And so with corduroy, I think it's the warp that's slightly raised above, and it gives a little texture. Corduroy is an example of a very heavy corded
Right.
fabric. So no, we're not talking, she was not wearing a corded dress. She wasn't even wearing a dress. She was wearing a skirt and what they called a waist or a basque,
Mm-hmm.
which was made of the same fabric. And if you don't have a lady's maid, the buttons are in the front. And you can change, and I have timed it very quickly out of such a garment. The skirt was separate with a hook plaque on the side, and the waist would have buttoned down the front. But because it was made out of the same cloth, it gave the appearance of a dress.
Right. And did one of the detectives give a really super good description of
Oh, yes.
Lizzie's
That,
dress that was
it,
kind of really funny?
it wasn't her dress. Nobody told Lizzie to change after the body of Abby Borden was found. She determined she would go upstairs, went in Emma's closet, took out a pink and white striped wrapper,
Oh, okay,
which was
that's the one.
a
Yeah.
loose garment women would wear in the family circle or if they were ill. You'd never wear it outside. And it had cherry red ribbons, a bosom in the waist, and
Mm-hmm.
Harry described it in such detail.
Yeah.
He's he's my favorite. He and Medley are my favorite of the
Yeah.
policemen, and yeah, he
So
sure knew.
we had a question from I think David Wolf. Yeah, and where was the paint stained dress during the police investigation? And don't we all want to know the answer to that question? But we have some theories
Right?
going.
Sure. We got some
Okay,
theories.
so there was a blue, light blue Bedford cord. We know that one, and then there was the pink wrapper, which she had changed into, and then there was the dark blue navy, which is the actual dress she gave to the court, which was a
Yeah.
heavier dress. All right, so we
It
have
was
three dresses.
Bengaline. Bengaline has a
Yes,
warp of silk and a weft of cotton or linen.
right. So
And it,
that's the one she gave to the courts, which is not the dress. So the Bedford cord is the missing dress that she burnt. Where was it? And, through conversations and conversations going back and forth, we believe that Emma's room was really the only room that the police never really thoroughly searched. In fact, I think one of the officers tripped over a bag or some bundle that was on the floor near in the closet. He just tripped over it, and then they went on. And I think we agree, that's where we think at first the dress was. It was rolled up in a bundle in
well,
Emma's
yeah,
closet.
he had opened Emma's, and when you say closet, this thing is only 13 inches deep. It's tiny.
Okay.
And as the policeman who was kind of shooed out because Dr. Bowen and Reverend Jubb, and by that point, um, they didn't want to upset Lizzie. Lizzie said, "It will make me ill if you ransack the room, searching." They did some cursory searching. But in the bottom of Emma's little shallow closet was something rolled up on the floor. But because of Dr. Bowen and the respect for doctors and ministers at the time, he didn't pause to really pull that thing apart to see what was in that little bundle. They gave a fairly brief look in the dress closet. Lizzie had to get up, go past the room where
Mm-hmm.
Abby laid on the floor, and unlock the front landing dress closet.
Right.
They didn't really do a good job of pulling through the clothes. There was a thought that she could have hidden a bloodstained, spattered dress under one of the winter dresses.
Mm-hmm.
I believe
You
she
had
actually
you had a
something
really
to that.
good theory too, because the room, Lizzie's bedroom, it was always kind of under protection. Like the police could never really get in there to do a thorough search, even though they
Well,
did.
yeah, I know what you're getting to. I'd considered perhaps the dress was put between the mattresses, or she spent most of that afternoon lounging on a chaise, um, and it could have easily been neatly folded under the cushions of the chaise, and she just sat on it, and nobody would have made her get up.
Right.
She, she had a wrapper on. The doctor was saying, she's had bromocaffeine. Lizzie says it will make me ill. Um, and they wouldn't have pushed the issue because of her status and her femininity helped
So,
her out.
Mickey Johnson says, I truly believe Lizzie used a flat iron.
Yeah, that was another theory. And I would invite you, Mickey, if you have access to a flat iron or you're in an antique shop, you see them everywhere. They're not very expensive. I have several myself. I don't have one handy. Hold on to a flat iron and try to swing it. It is so heavy that your wrist will go over, and it's not sharp. It certainly is a good blunt instrument if you want to conk somebody on the head. But if you want to do it repeatedly and make sharp cuts, you will not get that with a flat iron. I practiced with cantaloupes and watermelons.
Oh,
It makes a dent, but it does not make a cut.
wow, Shelly, you did that. It's funny.
You have to do these timing
Yeah,
experiments.
that's
You have,
funny.
yeah, you've got to visit the house. And in this case, the devil's in the detail. If you want to solve this thing, there's no thing that you should
O-
overlook.
Okay, so before we get to the next question, I'm gonna do question number 3. So Andrew and Abby Borden's ages when they were murdered were A. Andrew was 69, Abby 64. B. Andrew 70, Abby 66. Or C. Andrew 69 and Abby 62. How old were they when they were murdered? A. Andrew 69, Abby 64. B. Andrew 70, Abby 66. Or C. Andrew 69 and Abby 62. Okay, we got some numbers coming in. So, Michael, you asked this question, who do you think did the murder? Well, we have to be here for 2 years to figure out or to give that answer. That is what we all want to know, of course. And the reason that we have the podcast and what makes this case so interesting is all the theories and the 2,000 pages of trial transcript and the preliminary hearing and the inquest and, all the things that go into this trial that you try to pick apart to come up with an answer. So, of course, I spent 2 years of trying to figure that out and wrote a book called Inadmissible, The Case of Lizzie Borden and Other Murderous Women. And I focused on women and the society back then and what would make a woman want to murder. And, I came up, oh, thank you. I came up with the conclusion that I feel Lizzie was the murderer and solely the murderer. And in the last chapter of my book, it's just my opinion. And the last chapter is called, "Oh, come on, she did it." So, and I take you through how I believe she's done it. Now, I don't feel like I have everything figured out, which I don't think anybody can really say that they do. But I really feel she was like this superwoman back then with women's issues. Oh, thank you, Judy. That's very nice. I do give my reasoning throughout the book as to why I think a woman could have done such a brutal murder. And I think after
Well,
reading the book, you could probably say, yeah, I might have a point.
if I could interrupt you a moment, it's strange. Lizzie's become almost a folklore uh,
Yes.
character like Johnny Appleseed. And I've run into this for many, many years where you like Lizzie, you don't want her to have done it. She becomes, you become her champion.
Now I know where you're going with this. It's
Yes.
like,
And the thing is, all that we know of Lizzie through the diaries of her school friends, through her principal, through the dressmaker, through, various people who had dealings with Lizzie, um, she doesn't appear to me to have been a very nice person at the age that we're concerned with. When the obstacle to her unhappiness is removed, she becomes a very generous, charming old lady at Maplecroft. But in the back of my mind, I remember what others said about her: sullen, sulky, a loner, had a feeling of people were judging her and didn't have a good opinion of her. Um, didn't finish school. And as you mentioned in your book, Lizzie joined all kinds of things.
mm-hmm.
So she could hobnob with the people on the hill, but she was never invited to these balls and soirees and fancy things. The way, if you can't entertain the way you want to, and your father doesn't allow that kind of expense to reciprocate in entertaining, that was very important in that time period. The next best thing is you volunteer to be the secretary of Christian Endeavor or the Women's Temperance Union or the Fruit and Flower Mission or the Sunday School. That way, You are in the milieu of all these people,
So, and
and you get included in some of it, but you're not on the A list, shall we say.
right, and a lot of those clubs that she belonged to, and I sort of explored this idea. They were for women's rights. Like the Women's Temperance Union, they
Yeah.
did a lot of
Or,
things like to help support poor women, to find them housing. Like it was all about, like it was a very patriarchal society, and a lot of women were repressed. And the case goes so deep. I mean, this is this is one of the reasons we have the podcast too. I mean, we could really go off on a lot of different topics,
Mhm.
and one of the topics we are going to explore, not on this podcast but in the future, is Lizzie's psychological profile, and why she belonged to these clubs and then just stopped going to them, and her mental state at the time, and maybe a diagnosis of what that mental state was, living in a society where men ruled and women really didn't have any rights at all. In fact, one of the motives maybe for her to kill her father, was not only that it was an inconvenience that he came home early and she had to, because he knew that she was Abby's murderer, was also the other fact that, think about this: those girls never married. They never married. Why? Why, were both of them spinsters? And one of the reasons maybe is that they wanted to hold on to their inheritance. Because if you married, everything you owned went to your husband.
yeah, you find that that's not unusual pattern. If you walk through Oak Grove Cemetery and go to the big monuments
Yeah,
like Jefferson and Richard Borden,
yeah.
and some of the Davalls, the Shove, mill owner Charles Shove, which is right next to the Borden plot. You look at all the daughters, and they still have their maiden names.
Yeah.
They did not have to get married. They had plenty of money, and they didn't want their husband to get control. Of course, the wife's money became her spouse's money,
Mhm.
and they wanted independence and the freedom. And if you didn't have to marry, a lot of those women chose not to. They chose freedom and financial independence
Mhm.
and kept their hand on their own purse string.
Yeah, and I wonder how, like, how the conversation went when, months before the murder, Lizzie went on a grand tour of Europe with one of her cousins. And I often wondered what kind of conversations they had, because her cousin was very rich. She,
Yeah, Anna and Carrie Borden
right.
were not only rich, they were high society.
And they
And they
weren't married
moved.
either, just like a fact. Neither one of them
No, no,
married
they never
either.
married. If
Right.
you go, the largest monument in Oak Grove is Richard Borden, and you'll find their huge gravestones there. And they are buried still as Carrie and Anna Howland
Mhm.
Borden.
But think
Uh,
about that. These rich women, like and I always felt like Lizzie felt like she was in between, cuz she's.
oh, that's an excellent point. And I'll add one more thing to that, Kimbra. It's tough when you're almost there.
Right.
If you have no hope of ever rubbing elbows with these people, it's not so hard to take. But Lizzie was within inches of being the cultured, refined upper crust.
Right. And
And
the
her
pivotal
father, father had the money to make it happen. It's even tougher when you miss it by a hair. If she only had more money and
good point,
he wasn't
Nikki.
an and where she lived wasn't an obstacle. Lizzie could have hobnobbed with the Hill people easily and felt she deserved it.
So, and my pivotal moment in what you're saying, Shelley, is when the girls came back from that tour, and they went to the party, and Anna and Carrie were chauffeured up to their houses on the hill, and poor Lizzie was taken home by Fred. It was like kind of like that like,
It was a
oh, we'll just
chore.
right,
Going to take the Borden girls home.
right,
Exactly, exactly. And
right.
must have hurt. Uh, I think probably Lizzie was only invited probably because of all the work she did at church and
Yes,
because of
I agree.
Mary and Anna. They were distant cousins. Yes, I
Mm-hmm.
think they shared a great great father. But that was the case of the have Bordens, and then there were the have-nots, which were the lower end of the financial
Yeah,
scale. Lizzie floated between the haves and not quite getting the cream didn't quite rise to the top, although she felt she should have.
right.
And that's very hard to live with when you come so close and it's important to you. These days, that kind of thing doesn't matter. 1890s and 1880s, that was just critical to a woman
Right,
uh,
right.
to
It
have
was
a
all
high
about
appearances.
the image that they had like to
Mm.
project and their friends, women friends. Cuz
Oh, yeah.
I feel they stuck together no matter what. They stuck together. So we're going to do our fourth question. What year was Bridget Sullivan hired as a servant to the Borden family? And this is kind of important too in the story. So, was it A, November of 1889, B, August of 1890, or C, May of 1886? When was Bridget Sullivan hired as a maid in the Borden family? Was it November of 1889? Okay. Well, we're going to get to that question, Michael. August 1890 and May of 1886. Shelly, they want to know, Michael wants to know if you've had any
Oh,
paranormal.
paranormal. Yeah. Well, that house certainly ought to be haunted, if any house would be, one would imagine. I like to quote the late Edith Wharton by saying, I don't believe in ghosts, but I'm afraid of them.
I do believe in ghosts. I do believe in ghosts. Like,
It's interesting. I've been through many, many, I would say well over 100 seances there. Uh,
I think
I
you were telling me though, Shelley, the quiet times that you had in the house when you were
Yeah,
alone.
there were some times, most of the time you can explain things you smell or see, but from time to time, when I would be alone waiting for guests to come back from dinner for their night tour, I would hear walking in Lizzie's room back and forth and a muttering sound like people were talking, two people, a lower voice and a higher voice. And I would walk into the front hall and stand at the foot of the stairs. And as I started to go up the stairs to try to catch something, it would stop. All sound would
Shelley, that
stop. The
would
walk.
scare the bejeezies out of me. I don't know. That would
Oh
creep me.
no, no! I was hoping, to see something. I've never actually been afraid in the house. There are certain areas of the house that are creepier than others, and I don't like to sleep in the room where Abby Borden was killed. There's that atmosphere and expectancy and sort of a negative energy, if you want to call it that. And when you lie there in the dark, the mind, you're picturing who came
Mm-hmm.
through, who did this. The cellar, I've always had the feeling that something was hidden in the cellar.
Mm.
It had something to do with Lizzie's two trips to the cellar on the night of the murder. That's the word that popped in my brain when I first saw the house in 1995. Before it was converted and opened as a B&B, it was quite different inside. And this is when Mrs. McKinn had passed away, Miss Josephine McKinn. And the basement was the first place I went to. Um, I never liked going down there alone late at night. I don't
Yeah, I
know why.
wouldn't either. That's creepy, the cellar.
Well, but you talk to yourself. You're saying, okay, it's the living you need to worry about, not the dead. The dead don't hurt you, but some of the living walking around.
I tend to disagree because I have some friends who are the Haunted Collector. I don't know if you ever heard of that show, but my friend
Yes, I
Brian
have.
Cano,
Yeah.
He's a real paranormal investigator. He's told me some stories about, and I always thought if you're going to that side, then they certainly can come over to here. The
Hmm.
wash basin area is where you can make out the features of a face. Have you, Steve? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like
Well, that's in the chimney. When you take a
I never
picture
noticed
with
that.
the flash over the wash cauldron in the
Yeah.
wash cellar, um, there's kind of a light and dark shadows appear that take on the form of a face, which looks very like that of Andrew Borden.
Mm.
And I've seen that many, many times. In fact, that
Hmm.
was the finale of my cellar tour. We'd turn out all the lights and they would get their cameras out, and we got some interesting photographs. That was
Yeah.
not,
So I've been to the house quite a few times, and actually I was to an event 2 years in a row where we had a mock trial, and I was on the side of the prosecution, of course. And it was a trigger event, so we would have the trial in the day. It was a lot of fun, and then at night we would do that paranormal investigation.
yes,
Right.
yes,
So, but I've always had like in the house. It's kind of hard to explain, Shelly. I don't know, just a heaviness, like when you open the door and you go in and you're transported into this other world. But I always felt like a heaviness. I don't know if it was dread or anxiety that I'm in the
yes,
house,
yes.
something.
Dread and expectation
Yeah.
of fear, very strong. And I've had to walk guests to the bathroom. They're afraid to go upstairs, won't go in the basement. Occasionally, some will leave in the middle of the night, especially those who stay in the Morse room. I couldn't have worked there so many years if I were truly frightened.
So if Holly said there's many crosses, the family had many crosses in the living room?
Yes,
I never noticed
that,
that.
no, no, not now. This is before it became a B and B.
Oh.
Holly and I, we used to work at what they had after the centennial in 1992.
Mhm.
The city put on three Lizzie Borden expos. And Holly, who I see is here, Holly is the illustrator, does all the graphics for
Yeah, it's
the paper doll
fantastic.
and for
Yeah.
Warps and Wefts. We had a tour. Uh, Ron Evans took us through. He and Martha McGinn inherited 92, number 92, when Josephine passed away. They ran the Leary Press, which used to be attached to the side. And when Leanne and Donald purchased the house in 2004 from the McGinns, they knocked the Leary Press down. And for the first time in many years, sunshine came streaming through the windows in the sitting room. And I was there that day. It was very exciting because then I knew how it looked on the morning of the murders for the first time. But yes, there were a number of crosses in the house, in the bedrooms. This would have been 1995,
Hmm.
and they've been the property of the McGinns. We noticed some crucifixes. I don't know what the significance was.
So I'm going to do the very last question, question 5. Um, Andrew Borden provided his wife Abby and his two daughters Emma and Lizzie an allowance of 2,000 a month, 200 a month, or C, nothing. He didn't give them an allowance. So Andrew gave Abby and Emma and Lizzie an allowance, a monthly an allowance of A, 2,000 a month, B, 200, or C, nothing. That's the last question. So our title of the podcast, the new one, which you'll see next month, is Lizzie Borden, Tea and Murder. And tea time in the 1800s, there was a lot of tea drinking, so we decided to invite a tea expert to come on our show to share some tea tips and to talk about tea. She, has her own business with tea. I've learned a lot from her because I knew nothing about tea. I'm not a tea drinker, but we thought it would be appropriate and a lot of fun. So we have Rena here. Maybe we can bring Rena on. Hey, Rena.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Is it echoing? Because it's echoing on my end.
So maybe turn the speakers down a little bit or something so you don't like hear the feedback. Is it feedback? I don't know. This is what? Do you
I'm
have
echoing
headphones?
to me.
Do you have
If I'm not
headphones?
echoing to you, it's good.
Okay. Well, if you can deal with it. So we told our viewers that you're our tea expert and you have your own company, and that I didn't really know much about tea until I met you, and you've educated me a lot about tea, and you have some great products. So we thought we would invite you on to our podcast to talk about tea. And in the Victorian time, they drank a lot of tea. They had
Yeah.
tea in the morning, tea in the afternoon, tea in the evening. And I recently read today that rich people and then poor people had a whole different agenda and way and even choice of tea that they drank, which I thought is kind of crazy. But anyway, talk to us, Rena.
Well, I thought that today I would tell you a little bit about tea bags, actually. Thinking of Lizzie and the time that she lived, the tea bag was actually invented during her lifetime, but it was invented by two women who are basically ignored by history. People think that Thomas Sullivan in 1908 accidentally invented them in New York because he was a tea dealer and he would ship out his tea in little silk satchels. And people started brewing them in the satchels. And so that's the origin of the tea bag. But that's not actually the case. A few years earlier, in 1903, Roberta Lawson and Mary Malaran, and I may be saying her name wrong, from Milwaukee actually filed a patent for a tea leaf holder that essentially was a tea bag. So it's interesting talking about Victorian era and the way that women were treated, and the fact that these two women actually invented a tea bag and no one knows about it. This gentleman gets credit several years later. So I thought that that was neat. And the tea that I sell is from a company called Sipology. I'm considered a sipologist, and it is loose leaf tea. So it's the sort of tea that you would have put into one of these tea satchels instead of the tea bags that we're used to today. So I thought today I would show you my favorite tea, which is Earl Grey. This one is particularly Earl Grey de la Creme.
Oh,
And
and
I wanted to
I think they drank Earl Grey. Earl Grey was a favorite in the 1800s too, right?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Earl Grey is one of the teas that's considered like a regular tea that people drink all over. Earl Grey, English breakfast tea, Irish breakfast tea, those are sort of the general morning teas that people think of when they think of black tea. And most people think of black tea when they're thinking of the tea that they're drinking. So I thought that I would show the difference between what you get in a tea bag and what loose leaf tea is. So here, and I'm not sure if you can see it, here is the Earl Grey de la Creme from
Oh,
Sipology.
oh,
I
that's
want you to
nice.
take a look at how pretty that is. There's the little, they're almost like purpley blue flowers.
Yeah.
And I wish that there was a smell-o-vision because the aroma of this is just out of this world. And you could see the individual pieces, like there's actual pieces of things in this tea. Now I'm going to take a popular brand of Earl Grey. I am not going to name the brand. I specifically took the label off, but I want to show you what comes in a bag of Earl Grey that you get from a popular brand. This is it.
Okay.
It's basically dust and crumbs. You can see the color is this sort of brown.
Yeah,
And
the other
it's
one
little
looks
crumbs.
prettier.
Look at the difference.
Oh, wow.
And in smell, to me, this just smells like, I don't know, when you think of diner tea, like when you get a tea at a diner and the water's not hot enough, that's what
Yeah.
it smells like to me. But that's the difference between loose leaf and bagged tea. And people are worried about loose leaf tea. They say, how would I make loose leaf tea? Well, you would do it similarly to the way they would have in the Victorian era, by just putting the loose leaf tea into your teacup and then removing it when you're done brewing it. So we have different ways we could do that. I have an infuser here. This is called a universal infuser. This is a cute little cosmic pyramid tea triangle, or you can make your own tea bag with a steeping sack.
I have like a
So,
ball, like it's like a round ball that I
yeah,
got that you just put it in
yes,
the cup and pour
absolutely.
hot
The
water.
mesh, yeah, the mesh
Yeah.
tea balls. It does the same thing. But today I'm going to use my universal infuser right here. And you just take a scoop of tea, 1 teaspoon to 1.5 teaspoons. Each tea usually tells you how much to put on it. Mine says 1 teaspoon, 2 to 3 minutes, one time. I have all these little containers. And it's the same tea that I just showed you, so you can see it right there. Oh, it smells so good. And you take 1 scoop, you put it in the infuser, you put it on your teacup, and you add your hot water. Then you let it sit for the desired amount of time. I have a little tea timer here that I can set to black tea, which is 2 to 3 minutes. So it'll ding when it's done. And then you have a cup of tea. Simple as that.
Nice. So we're gonna put up your website where we can go to see all of your stuff. I mean, I could talk to you for hours about this because there's so much on your website having to do with nutrition. I mean, the matcha I just learned about. We can talk about the next time, but I love it.
There's
Yes,
Earl Grey matcha too.
yes. Oh, there you go. There's one thing that is in the catalog. It's just such an amazing website, and I didn't know that tea could come in so many different forms, and even in food, and putting it in like really fun, like tropical drinks, and it's such a great.
Alcohol drinks. I know Lizzie wouldn't approve, but
Yeah. Oh,
yes,
and
you can
heal
do a lot with
thyself.
alcohol.
That section with the calming, soothing. Like there's different teas for different things.
Yeah,
Um,
they're natural medicine in Canada. The US doesn't have a comparable title, so it's just considered a supplement here, but there are
yeah,
teas that are medicine. So
yeah,
I use them quite often.
yeah. So the quick question about the Earl Grey, that's kind of like a starter tea for people that are just learning about tea. What about the caffeine in that? Is there a lot of caffeine, or is it
So, yes, Earl Grey is a black tea. Black tea is one of the higher caffeinated versions of
okay?
tea. It is not the highest, but it's what people generally think of as caffeinated tea. Usually it has around 60 milligrams of caffeine.
Mm.
That's comparable to, there's 90 in a cup of coffee. So it's
Oh,
less than coffee.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's not
There
so
are
bad.
other kinds of teas like Pu'er, which is probably one of my favorite kinds. It has 70 milligrams of caffeine in it, and
Okay.
it's stronger. It's actually black tea fermented and processed in a slightly different way.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, our tea specialists. We're happy. And, we'll have you back next month when we, do this podcast again. We're going to be doing, I guess, a monthly podcast. And,
Okay.
we'd love to learn more about your delicious teas. I'm
Absolutely. I'm
excited.
looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank
And
you
if
so
people have
much.
questions or they want to learn something in particular, I'd be happy to address it.
Yeah, I know you're good for that. I do. She's hands on, Rena. So we'll put up your website and your chat, whatever that if people want to get in touch with you, we'll pass on the information. And thank you so much.
Thanks
Yay.
for having me.
All right. So thanks, and we'll talk to you later. All right.
Great. Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.
Kimbra,
Yes.
while Rena was talking about tea, I went to my collection cabinet and got out my box of Garfield tea.
Oh,
I don't know if
guys.
you can see it. This is what Mr. Borden was taking for his illness. He didn't want to pay to go to see Dr. Bowen like Abby did. This is a vintage box. You can find it on eBay
Oh, I hope
fairly
Rena's still on
inexpensive.
watching this so she could see this. Wow.
Well, I wanted to tell you what's in it
Yeah.
and how Andrew would have taken it. Do
Okay.
we have time?
Yeah, and then we're gonna close it out with our answering the questions to our trivia. But this will be our last thing. So let us know what's
Oh,
in it.
okay. Well, apparently it's senna, something called couch grass, uh, balmony, Balmoney, and dandelion green. And it says it's a combination of simple herbs which have a laxative effect and is taken by many users with satisfactory results. Uh,
Okay.
this package contains a sample, and here's how Andrew would have taken it. He would have put a heaping teaspoon of the herbs in this, and the herbs are still in the box, by the way.
Wow.
Fill the cup with boiling hot water, like a senna tea is what this is. Let it steep for 3 minutes and strain. And you could have it hot or cold. You could add sugar to it. You could give it to children. And apparently it came from England.
Mm.
You could also get it in Canada or Buenos Aires. Who knew? And I don't know if it worked or not.
Hmm.
He was still sick there on the Thursday morning, and he'd been taking it since Tuesday night. So senna is usually a laxative, and I guess what it would do. And here's a thought: if the Bordens had been poisoned on Tuesday night, it may not have been the swordfish steak that had gone off. By taking a senna laxative, which is pretty effective very quickly, poison could have exited the body from taking this
Hmm. Interesting.
preparation. I mean, I just connected that.
Wow. That's a
Well,
thought. Never thought of
there's
that.
another thing we can think about.
Yeah. Just add that to the pile of we won't even go there. It's
And the
like
next time we get together, I collect books. They're called household compendiums.
okay.
And the Bordens did have such a thing in their home.
Yeah.
All married women, they were given as wedding gifts. It tells you everything on how to make mutton stew, through what happens if you are accidentally poisoned.
Mm.
And it was always said, this has come down word of mouth, that this sort of book that was found in the Borden's home tended to open very quickly and automatically, as if someone had looked at it often, to the section on poison. And next time, we'll take a look at what this says about prussic acid.
Love
And
to.
this book,
And, next time we can talk about poisons, poisons in the house, different poisons, and connect that. So we're going to go over the trivia questions. Um, so, how old was Abby Gray when she married Andrew Borden? And the answer is she was 37 years old.
her birthday is January
And
21st.
just a quick fact: when Abby was taking care of her at the time of her wedding, and think about this: Abby was 37. Abby was taking care of her mother who died from consumption. Only 17 months after her mother's death, Oliver Gray, her father, remarried a woman who was 25 years younger than her.
This would have
So
been
Abby lived in a household um, with a stepmother who was a mere 1 year older than she was, and a new half sister who was 36 younger than her. So my thought immediately went to, marrying Andrew was a really good opportunity for Abby to get out of the house because of that situation. Question number 2 was about the will, and the answer is C. Lizzie left in her will 0 to Emma. Nothing to Emma. So, The next question, Andrew and Abby Borden's ages when they were murdered. Andrew was 69 and Abby was 64. What year did Bridget Sullivan, what year was she hired? She was hired in 1889. So she was only in the house for like a little over 2 years until the Bordens were murdered, right? Right. Which is a thought, something to think about. Because how could she become really good friends in 2 years? I mean, it's something to think about. And the last question, the answer is, how much allowance did the girls get, Shelley?
Well, Abby had to pay for household things out of her allowance. But I think in today's money, it would come out, I think, to, was it $200 a month? Was that
Yeah.
one of the choices?
Mm-hmm. The answer is
spend-
$200 a month.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. There was a lot of money. It was a lot of money back then, I think.
Well, and Lizzie and Emma got to spend it on on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Abby did. I know
Right.
Abby bought lace curtains for the parlor.
Mm-hmm.
Very proud of those, but she had to pay for that,
Yeah.
not out of household, but out of her own little personal allowance.
So, while we were doing, thank you. I have some helpers here in the studio. Love it. So while we were doing, like, I have this. I had my friend Larry put in everybody's name in here. Like he's been busy putting people's names in here. So I'm going to draw, and Kenny, you can put that trading card up. So I started a series of trading cards. What's unique about the trading cards is I recruited a bunch of artists to do their interpretation of different characters in the Borden story, Lizzie Borden. I allow them to choose like which one. And of course, this first trading card is from my book Inadmissible. It's Lizzie, my superhero. And then on the back of the card, it has facts about Lizzie Borden. And you know, so it's the front, and then you flip it over, and it's the fact. It's sort of like baseball cards. So I'm starting a series of this. So that's what the prizes are going to be. I'm going to mail you trading cards. And they're, I decide I want to make it a limited edition. So it's kind of fun. But I'm going to draw 2 names out of here. The first name is, oh God, Larry. Jody. Is it Jody?
No, probably Judy.
Let me look.
Is it Ella back?
It is Judy. No, I got it here. It's Judy Baker.
Yes.
Judy got 1. All right, and the next winner is, I can't read his handwriting, but it is Joanne Walker.
Yes.
Giovanni. So those are the 2 winners. So I am going to get in touch with you guys after this, and you can give me your address, and I'll mail you those trading cards. So that's fun. So next time when we get together, we're going to pick a topic, poison. You can actually message us too, something that you would want to talk about. And we're going to have Rena talk about another tea. And I'd also like to invite one of you guys on to maybe just give us your theory about who you think did it and why, or even the topic that we're talking about. To have you on our podcast as a guest for 5 minutes or so. It would be kind of fun. We can set you up for that. So until next month, Shelley, thank you so much. It was fun.
It flew by. We've got
Yeah.
so much more to talk about.
There is a lot. That's why we have to narrow it down to categories. So one of them is at least going to be a poison discussion and household things. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for all these great comments. Thank you for loving the Lizzie Borden story, and maybe we'll see you sometime in Fall River. So until next time, signing off. Judy, yes, you did win something. You won. You were one of the winners, Judy.